Hey guys, it's Graham. What's cracking? A couple of weeks ago over on the Cracker Stack, I wrote up some ideas that I had for how the Falcon and the Winter Soldier TV show could have been written just a little bit better to give it a higher rating amongst the audience and stuff. After Endgame happened, this was one of a few shows that got announced that would be streamed on Disney Plus, and it was the one that I was looking forward to the most. I've just really enjoyed this lineup of characters. Captain America, the Falcon, the Winter Soldier, and all of the slightly more grounded and military adjacent characters in the catalog were among my favorites. I was a little bit disappointed with the writing and the direction that they decided to take it, and so as a bit of an exercise in editing and story analysis, I thought, what would they have to change in order to make this story land a little bit better and get a better response out of the audience? I took on this challenge with a couple of parameters, key among them being that I wouldn't completely rebuild it from the ground up. What if I still wanted to play with a lot of the elements that they were putting into the show to begin with and just make minor, more sensible, and more effective changes so that the whole thing came together a lot better? This is what I came up with. First, we're going to review how the story actually played out, and then I'll talk about the changes that I might make. So, we start off with Sam. He was given the shield at the end of Endgame, and in the start of the show, he immediately gives it up. He puts it up in a museum, he gives a speech, and then he pieces out. He's busy trying to get his Louisiana family back on their feet. That's his sister and his two nephews. He still flies missions for the government as Falcon so that he can pay the bills. Suddenly, a group of terrorists pop up in Europe, and Sam teams up with Captain America's oldest friend Bucky to go track them down and stop their antics. This group is the Flag Smashers. Along the way, he has what I feel was a poorly written discussion with Bucky about why he didn't want to take up the shield. And he also, throughout the course of his adventure, gets lectured by a black veteran about how evil and bad and racist America is. This veteran was in the Army in the 1950s. We'll come back to him in a minute. When the man who does take up the shield turns out to be a raging psychopath, Sam decides that he'll take it back and he will become Captain America, even though America is still evil, bad, racist, whatever. Seriously, my frustration with this storyline is that the films had never gone down this poisonous route, yet the show decided that it was actually 1954 again and that they needed to drum this all up and hash it out, and it really took it in a bad direction, but I've got more ideas on that in a minute. The story ended with the help of the Wakandans, who provided Sam with a vibranium high-tech wingsuit, and he now carries the shield, and he calls himself Captain America. As far as Bucky's character, he's on a crusade to kind of make up for the things that he did when he was the brainwashed Winter Soldier. He killed a lot of people, he broke a lot of things, he's on a path of redemption. He uses his deep Hydra knowledge to root out corrupt assets in the new government. He is mad at Sam for giving up the shield that Steve Rogers gave him. He does team up with Sam, all the same, in order to catch these Flag Smashers in Europe. During that excursion, Bucky and Sam meet John Walker, the new official government-issued Captain America who has the shield. Bucky and Sam hate John Walker because he is a tool. They also spring Baron Zemo from prison so that they can use what he knows in order to find the Flag Smashers, because they have super soldier serum, and they know that Baron Zemo doesn't like super soldiers. When John Walker gets his hands on some of that serum and takes it and goes semi-insane, Bucky and Sam have to kick his butt and take the shield back. Bucky's personal arc ends when he apologizes to a Japanese man named Yori, whose son he killed back when he was the brainwashed Winter Soldier. His story ends when we fade to black and we see really no consequences of that interaction. We don't even see Yori's reaction to the confession that Bucky killed his son. Bucky is just sad. There's no substantive resolution compared to where he was at the beginning of the show. As for the John Walker character, like I said, he's the new corporate-sponsored, government-issued Captain America. He is a physical specimen all on his own, but he doesn't have the serum to begin with. He's just outclassed by regular Joes who do have the serum, and this makes him sad. when he does get the serum and goes briefly insane and kills a terrorist with the cap shield in front of scores of witnesses, he suffers the worst fate that anyone can in the age of the internet, and that is demonetization. Seriously, like he gets cast aside by the government, and he gets kind of court-martialed for what he did, and he has to go into ignominy for a brief amount of time. The only way out for him is a rebrand, which he gladly accepts at the end, although the show really tries to sell the name U.S. Agent from the comics. This is all in line with the very rough and loose bullet points of his character from the comics, but it was kind of ham-fisted in just to get that branding all in there. He will appear again in the Thunderbolts. We'll see how they handle it from there. We also get to visit with Isaiah Bradley. He was one of a few Captains America in the comics. His background, he's a bit more of a recent invention. He was based on the Tuskegee experiments, which were a real thing. The government basically injected a bunch of black dudes with syphilis to study what would happen. Yes, this is a bad thing that the PHS and the CDC did because, like all three-letter agencies, they are actually run by psychopaths with no conscience, and they have been for a century, but I digress. Bradley's story was adapted to this show. He was just injected with an experimental super soldier serum instead of syphilis like happened in the real world, along with several other Black Army soldiers. Their version of the serum was synthesized from Steve Rogers' blood samples in the 1940s. If you remember in the Captain America First Avenger movie how after Dr. Erskine was killed, they extracted a whole bunch of blood from Steve and took it away in vials. It was that stuff. Isaiah Bradley's iteration of the serum worked. It actually took. He became a super soldier, so he was locked in an army cell for 30 years and pumped for blood by the military, trying to figure out how to make more of it. As a result, he, very understandably, hates the government, and, being a man of his era and life experience, he thinks that America is and always will be evil, bad, and racist. He has some conversations with Sam about this, saying outright that America will never let a black man carry the captain's shield, disregarding that a man who served in World War II handed that shield to Sam to begin with, and it was Sam who turned it down. In the end, Sam fights for Isaiah to get recognition for his service in the military, including his time in Korea when he fought the Winter Soldier behind enemy lines. That was a cool little piece of throwaway dialogue, and it would have been neat to see it maybe in a flashback, see a younger Isaiah actually duking it out with Winter Soldier and ripping his arm off, but I digress. It does sound like Isaiah, played by Carl Lumbly, will be in this upcoming Captain Falcon movie. As for how they used Baron Zemo, if you'll remember, he is the former Sokovian Special Forces operator who single-handedly turned the Avengers against each other with just his mind and his cunning, leaving them in disarray when Thanos arrived. Sam and Bucky bust him out of prison because, well, really because the script demands it, but under the auspices of them needing what he knows. He helps them find the super soldier serum. His escape angers the Dora Milaje, that's the special lady warriors from Wakanda, because Zemo did kill their king back in Civil War. When they hear that he's out, they come hunting him down. Bucky has to intervene and talk with them, and it brings the Dora Milaje into the story, and since Bucky has a history with them, their presence generates more conflict and more opportunity for backstory. This is good because you see the role that the Wakandans played in kind of deprogramming Bucky's brainwashing, which was established in the MCU stuff, but it gave us a glimpse into what that was like. We also get a quick visit with Sharon Carter. She did have consequences for helping Steve and the other guys escape during Civil War. She had to go into hiding after that, and this is the first real kind of checkup that we do on that character. The idea that she wouldn't have been pardoned for that after all of this, it's a harder sell than what they actually came up with for the show. They have her moved to like Southeast Asia or the Pacific. She becomes a crime lord with a far-reaching empire worth millions. I think that was a really dumb arc for this character. They did need someone to create this new version of the super soldier serum, and under the moniker of the power broker, she does that. The Power Broker is a character from the comics, but it's not Sharon Carter. This was just a bad mashup of ideas here, and I wish they'd done something different with it. Finally, we check in with Carly Morgenthau. She's a ginger girl in her 20s who, for reasons inexplicable to the viewer, is supposed to be an inspiring leader of an Antifa-style terrorist group who wants free food and housing. This is the MCU's version of the Flag Smashers. We don't really get any inspiring speeches from her. They just have all the henchmen and characters around her be like, oh yeah, you're the best leader we've ever had, and it didn't land. Sam and Bucky track down the Flag Smashers, and this is where they learn that there's more super soldier serum out in the world. This sets the large part of the series story in motion. She dies in the end, and that's pretty much the end of the Flag Smashers. She's a dumb villain. She's nowhere near as effective or charismatic as her cast would demand that you think she is. That's it. So that's the story that they told. Here's what I would do instead. For the sake of the challenge, like I said, we're going to do a couple things different, but we're still going to do mostly what the studio wants. They wanted to have Sam in the Captain America suit. They wanted him carrying the shield. They wanted him taking up the mantle. They also wanted to have a commentary on being black in America and trying to square the circle, as it were. Finally, they want to establish Sam as the new leader of the Avengers. In order to do this, you wouldn't need to make drastic or dramatic changes. You could start with Sam working for the military again as the Falcon, chasing down guys like Bartrock the Leaper. It makes sense for him to cut his teeth on this guy to prove that he can do the kind of stuff Steve Rogers did, even with a different skill set. Steve did it fighting with the shield, doing hand-to-hand combat, and having the super soldier serum. Sam can do it flying around and being the Falcon. You can also show that he's strapped for cash the way that half the world is. This makes it possible for him to at least grasp the problem that the Flag Smashers are using for their rallying cry. Like, hey, we effectively doubled the population of the world in an instant, therefore cutting the resources in half that we would need to support it. That's a real logistical problem that you've got to solve. Finally, you can even give him the tough buddy cop angle with Bucky. Like, all of that stuff can stay the way that it is at the beginning. You got to remember also that Sam ran alongside Captain Rogers for 4 years in this story. That's a whole tour of duty, at least as long as Bucky did in the 1940s. Yet, Sam isn't friends with Bucky. They have different styles, different attitudes, and he has a hard time expressing to Bucky that he doesn't want the shield. Deep down, he doesn't need it and doesn't want to have to alter his entire skill set to adapt to it, but he feels obligated because of the circumstances of its inheritance. Here's where we have Sam say that he doesn't like that Steve and Bucky made the choice for him, and that feels like an order from two men who he thought were his equals as Avengers. There's your conflict. It's like, hey, I thought we were all shoulder to shoulder in this, then I come and find out that you guys made this choice behind my back for me. From there, you have Sam and Bucky find out about the Flag Smashers. They think it's just a terrorist group that has thus far evaded the current global Senate's forces. They move to intercept, only to get their bells rung when they find out that these Smashers are also super soldiers. They try to figure out how that happened. That leads them to Isaiah, the only other living super soldier that Bucky knows about because of his Hydra intelligence. Bucky doesn't want the Senate to know about Isaiah, so he and Sam have to do this next part of their operation off the books. They need more intel and resources. This leads them to pick up Zemo as their next asset. Again, you don't have to change much. It can follow that same pacing. There's a technical and logistical reason for it. Right about here is where Sharon Carter could appear if they needed to include her. It would have made more sense for her to be more on a budget, working in the shadows overseas until she gets recruited by someone in the Flag Smashers, at which point she breaks cover and reaches out to some friends back in America to tell them what's going on. You could have her use her skills as a former S.H.I.E.L.D. agent in a meaningful and apt way, instead of having her become an overpowered crime boss covering an entire quadrant of the world. With Sharon's insights, Sam, Bucky, and Zemo could track down the real Power Broker, more on him in a minute, only to be intercepted by John Walker, just like in the show. Now it's a standoff between two veteran Avengers doing the job on a shoestring budget versus the new kid on the block who has the shield and the backing of the world government. I will say that it's important to have the Dora Milaje make an appearance here, though they can be written better than they were. We can show those glimpses into Bucky's time in Wakanda, because that'll matter for Sam's story as well. Wakanda has an interest in seeing Zemo face justice for killing T'Chaka. We can let that story beat play out like normal. Then we can have Walker get the serum. He kills one of the Smashers. Bucky and Sam take the shield back. They return stateside, and Sam acquiesces reluctantly to Bucky that he should have kept the shield. Doing so would have spared a lot of the headache on this run. It would have kept the government from rebranding Captain America and sending Walker on his little crusade, which ended with a body count. Nevertheless, Sam can still struggle with the idea of being the captain, and he wonders whether he, without his wings and without the serum, can handle guys like the Flag Smashers. This is where we'll have Sam break off. He can go to talk to Isaiah, again, like he did in the show, about living with that kind of strength. What did it do to change him, and so on and so forth. Did Isaiah ever struggle to keep his sanity like John Walker did? Isaiah can even largely give the same speech here that he does in the original show. He can express contempt for how he was used. He can reaffirm his mentality that America still hates black men like it did in his day. He can drop that line, they will never let a black man be their Captain America. This doesn't need to be taken away from this character because his lived experience in the chronology makes sense for the world that was established. This is an idea that I personally do not hold, yet it makes sense for Isaiah to hold it given what he lived through. The writers did have something there. Sam leaves with even less clarity than he had before. He hasn't had the same experience as Isaiah. He is an American veteran, but he is also a product of a different time. That said, he knows someone who is a product of that time, who lived through the 40s and 50s. He goes to talk to Bucky. This is where we can finally have Sam and Bucky kind of develop their own rapport instead of just both being attached to Steve. Like the original, Bucky and Sam can have a conversation about this, but the critical difference will be that Bucky can tell Sam, yeah, things were rough for blacks in America in the 40s in a way that Bucky never had to experience. The great unifier was the work that they did. He can say, hey, look at the Howling Commandos. Dugan was Irish, Jones was black, Morita was Japanese, nobody cared. We were all in the trenches at the same time. Furthermore, Bucky can share something he learned from his time in Wakanda. He can say that when T'Challa needed to fend off a challenge to the throne and unite the 5 tribes, he reached out to the Jabaris, who, historically, had been antagonists of his own tribe. M'Baku, the Jabari chief, said that his people were wronged in the past and he didn't know why he should care what T'Challa needed. In Black Panther, T'Challa specifically told M'Baku that he would not apologize for past kings, but he was not going to rule like them either. The lesson in that for Sam is that he can still be the captain. He doesn't have to be Steve Rogers, and he doesn't have to apologize for what his nation did before he was born. What matters is how he's going to lead going forward. Bucky and the Wakandans can then present Sam with a new set of vibranium wings, since John Walker destroyed his originals, and then Bucky can once again hand Sam the shield. We'll end the show with the Smashers coming back stronger than ever. They move to attack the Global Senate for their own reasons. Get to that in a second. Give us a huge epic battle at the end. The good guys win, the bad guys die. Maybe we can even understand the difficulty of the task facing the Senate, like feeding, housing, and funding the return from the snap. We can be understanding of the magnitude of that challenge. Don't have that stupid speech where Sam yells at them to just do better, like that's going to solve the problem, because it's not. Sam's role in this battle will change a little bit. He'll do his best to fight with the shield, but once again, it's just not his style. It's counter to his entire methodology, his reflexes, his experience, everything. Plus, he doesn't have the super soldier serum, and even if the shield is invincible, he isn't. He has to fight different. During this big epic battle, he's able to hurl the shield to Bucky and fall back on his instincts, boosted by the new Wakanda tech. Bucky can pull some epic moves with the shield, the bad guys get owned, the day is saved. In the end, we'll cut to a scene where Sam is painting the vibranium wings in the colors of the Falcon, but with an American flag patch on the shoulder. We'll get a small cameo from Rhodes, War Machine. He's also Air Force like Sam, but he outranks him. He's a lieutenant colonel. Rhodes can inform Sam that he is promoted to the rank of captain in War Machine's chain of command. This makes him Captain Wilson, the Falcon, leader of the Avengers, and the US military is still in the loop. When he's asked about the shield, Sam tells Bucky to keep it. If Steve and Tony could figure out how to work together, you and I can too. This is an instrument for your time, and you're a better fit for it than I am. Boom. The studio gets their brief time with Sam as Captain America. It doesn't work. They have a great reason for him to keep being the Falcon, while also handing the shield to Bucky. Now we move forward with Captain Wilson leading the Avengers. As for Bucky, well, something that has bothered me about his arc ever since Civil War is that too many people blame him for what he was forced to do against his will. He was literally mind-controlled, but the aggrieved parties act like he chose to kill people. It's one thing for Bucky to have PTSD about his actions as a Hydra asset. It's another thing for the whole world to pile on him about it. Once again, without changing too much from the show as constituted, a better character journey for Bucky is his self-forgiveness. Have him befriend Yori, have him struggle to admit to Yori what he did, but Bucky has to admit it in order to gain closure. You can have everyone around him, Sam, Rhodes, his therapist, everyone, tell him that it wasn't his fault for what he did, but you can have Bucky resist accepting this idea because none of them were affected by what he did. You can even flash back to the fight between Steve and Tony in Civil War. Tony knew that Bucky was brainwashed and still said, "I don't care, he killed my mom." It'd be normal for Bucky to think that Yori couldn't forgive him for that same reason. But then when Bucky finally confesses to Yori, who greatly misses his son, Yori can be the one to forgive him because he understands that Bucky didn't have a choice in the matter. And that way, two friends can share their pain together better than they can alone. This can be a powerful emotional moment and a satisfying resolution to Bucky's overall journey in the MCU. This is where he starts to heal. In the end, he'll finally start to feel a little bit worthy of the shield, and we can reveal that Steve actually offered it to him once, but Bucky turned it down and said Sam was the better man. Now that that is all resolved, the next iteration of his story begins, and all of this matters. All of this means a lot more. As for changes with Walker, I don't think there's a terrible amount of work to do with this character. He accomplished what he was put into the story to do. I think we can pretty much leave him as he is. They're bringing him back in the Thunderbolts, and I'm curious to see what the next leg of his story looks like. With Isaiah, again, you don't need to change his character for this version. The real story is about Sam, who needs to wrestle with what Isaiah tells him about his own experience. Sam will still fight for recognition of Isaiah's heroism in the Korean War, and could even pursue an admission of wrongdoing in the historical record against the officials that ordered his imprisonment. That gives justice to a man who was wronged and had to suffer his entire life for it. With Zemo, I don't know, the main thing I would change about him is you could tone down the attempt to reconcile Zemo to his comic book iteration. They wanted so badly to give him the purple mask, yet there was no reason to do it, and it looked stupid. With Sharon, I'm fine with some appearance by Sharon Carter that gives viewers closure after her role in Civil War, where she made herself an enemy of the state by aiding Rogers, but don't have her be the power broker. There are two versions of the power broker in Marvel lore. The second one is less defined, which makes it a little bit more malleable. This is where a writer with some long-distance vision could establish the Serpent Society, which is the villain, from what I understand, in the upcoming Brave New World movie. You could pick some powerful figure from that group and have them fund or organize the Flag Smashers in an attempt to destabilize this new global Senate. This is where we get to Morgenthau. Say it with me. Karl Morgenthau. Karl, not Carly. He's a dude. Oh, but his name sounds so German. Yeah, and Captain America historically fought some Germans. It makes sense. Stop crying. Give us the man from the comics. Give him the moniker of Flag Smasher, and for crying out loud, give him a better motivation besides, we're hungry, we want free stuff. That's the exact same problem half the world is dealing with. The Smashers are just being a-holes about it. Their motivation should be understandable, yet problematic. With a name like the Flag Smashers, their goal should be to sweep the leg on weak governments as they stagger to form the global Senate, destroying their ability to organize and assert power over the world. Why? Because they're operating at the behest of the power broker. That entity ultimately wants power for itself, and it'll operate in the shadows to get what it wants under false pretenses. If two super soldiers, Steve and Bucky, could fortify the Avengers, then a dozen could make the Flag Smashers formidable. Show their reach and their versatility by having them steal the data on Steve's blood, synthesize the formula from Isaiah's blood, and make a new formula that's even better than both. Don't have Sharon hire some guy to hide out in a storage container and figure out how to duplicate it that way. This is more compelling. When they ultimately fail, we can then find out that the Flag Smashers were manipulated, along with the Power Broker, by the Serpent Society, who used them for a test run against these new Avengers and their allies in the government. While the Avengers lineup is more solid now and they have a leader and the Shield is back in action, they also have a clearer view of what they're up against. With that, we can head into Captain America Brave New World, only this time it gets to be the Falcon movie that Anthony Mackie never got. In conclusion, the most dramatic changes to this version of the story would be to the villain, but only to make it A, more coherent, B, more compelling, and C, more conducive to a meaningful sequel down the road. And Marvel is in dire need of meaningful sequels. With the Infinity Saga out of the way, Marvel's villain problem can become a more episodic thing instead of an ongoing soap opera of movies and streaming shows. Give people an easy in and easy out, and you'll broaden the accessibility of the audience. But the one thing that they absolutely have to stop doing is using these productions as pulpits for whatever political and cultural cause du jour they've taken up. They have years of empirical evidence that doing this destroys their craft and their product. Stop doing it. Dare I say, do better. Thanks for watching. Drive safe. See you out there.